I counted 23 different combinations on the D-line in that game on Thursday night. I mean, is that a record? Have you ever used that many in one game?
I couldn't tell you it's a record, but obviously we came into this season with a lot of depth and intend to play a lot of guys, so I didn't track really combinations. What I was tracking was rep count through the course of the game. We got a lot of guys that are capable of playing good football for us. As you know, obviously John Morgan, in some ways, I think we all here know that John Morgan's a heck of a player, but in some ways had a coming out game, so to speak, on Thursday. I almost said Saturday, Thursday night. And, it just goes to show that we have depth and guys that can make some plays.
What do you guys need to do better in the run defense part as far as stopping what they were doing?
Yeah, biggest thing was some communication issues on the touchdown drive in the first half. We had some communication issues where we weren't on the same page. And you got to tip your hat to West Virginia. They did some good things as far as pre-snap things that we spent a lot of time getting cleaned up in the last 72 hours. So I feel good that we have those things cleaned up. And there's always technique things to improve on every week throughout the entire season.
Charlie, communication is big every week, but especially with this tempo, how big is that going to be?
It's enormous, and thankfully we face these guys really in our minds for the fourth time now with going back with Heupel to Central Florida, and we learned a hard lesson down there in Orlando that first year that whatever your plan is, you better make sure that it's tight and concise, and you don't get too cute in terms of what you're trying to do schematically, so the kids can operate and communicate extremely quickly. Because last year this time, on average, we time how long it takes them from whistle to snap, and they're 4 seconds faster than they were a year ago. So they're back into, kind of that realm they were at Central Florida, which makes sense because a year ago we were facing them after one game together. Now we're facing them after 14 games together, so it's really not a surprise to us that they're operating at that optimum speed.
Tempo offense used to be a novelty, but now it's like the norm.
To a degree, but this group is different. They have it down to a science. If you watch their players after a game, you may have one of the referees on the sideline begging for the ball, but he's being ignored as that player is throwing it to the umpire so it gets set that much faster. They truly have it down to a science. And when you're getting that thing off and at an average of 12 seconds, you're operating at a level that really can't get much faster within the rules.
Are they efficient?
They are, yeah. I mean, you really have to, in some ways, marvel at how they do it. It's impressive. I mean, they've got a talented O-line. They have two really good quarterbacks. We faced both last year. Speed at the receiver spot. A stable of running backs, and they operate well. And it's impressive to watch them work.
Communication was an issue last week. How do you focus on it to say, like, hey, you got to be not only sharper but quicker in knowing where you got to be?
Yeah, and again, I think it comes down to making sure your game plan is tight, concise. You fix every week. You're fixing things that created issues from the week before. Some of the things that West Virginia did, we don't anticipate from Tennessee. However, we're fully prepared to. We tend to practice things that teams may or may not copycat. Oftentimes, if you have a play or something that hurts you in a previous week, you can almost anticipate that coming and being copycatted. So we're working on those things, and like I said, we're working to eliminate the communication issues. And we have some experienced D-line, but we still have some young guys working in there. We have some young linebackers that for their first time of game action. So we'll be a lot better this week. I'm confident of that.
What do you do in
Is it
practice?
possible to simulate that tempo at all in practice?
We work hard at it. I mean, we do everything we can. Our goal in practice when we're working with what we call the Rocks, our scout team, our goal is to get the playoff in 10 seconds, which is hard. We have a lot of people involved in that operation. The entire coaching staff gets involved in helping our Rocks operate at that type of a speed. It's a challenge, but I think we do a good job of trying to simulate that through the course of this week.
With John, you've mentioned a breakout performance, so to speak. What was the difference between what we saw from him Thursday and maybe what we've seen in camp or even from last year that got him over that edge?
Well, I think in camp I was anticipating a performance and hopefully a season like we saw Thursday night. He's really just gotten better in his fundamentals. He's committed to being solid in the run game and transitioning when the pass opportunity shows up. So, it wasn't just a couple sacks and quarterback, pressures. You had a couple TFLs in there where it was, playing with good run technique. So his game has just continued to swell. All facets of his game have continued to rise, and I'm excited that you guys got to see what I was hoping would come out, because I think he's really doing things at a high level right now.
Coaches always prepare for as many scenarios as possible. So I was kind of curious. There was a play on Thursday night. West Virginia made a late sub. Kalijah came in and took some time. West Virginia ended up having to take a timeout. Is that a scenario you guys had ever discussed, or was that just sort of spur of the moment? Hey,
Yeah,
here's an opportunity.
I mean, at the end of the day, if they sub, we're allowed to match their personnel, right? So we know how the operation works. As soon as they sub, we communicate that on our headsets. We look to see that the referee, the gentleman with the white hat, is holding the signal that they're substituting. Gives us the opportunity to substitute. So we want to make sure that we got the matchup that we want, and worked out at that moment really well. On the flip side of it, we had an issue with 12 guys on the field, so we got to get better in those moments where it has to be a fast sub situation. But we definitely work on the different possibilities of substituting on defense.
You mentioned how you guys are working on different things that you got to see in practice. Pat mentioned to us how there was a certain formation that you guys practiced a lot of last week and then didn't end up using much in the game. Could you elaborate more on like what went into that and how you avoid that moving forward?
Well, if I'm hearing your question right, I think it might be from an offensive perspective, because you talked about a formation that we didn't use.
I thought it was a defensive look that he was talking about.
Yeah. So from the formation perspective, I couldn't answer it, but certainly one of the challenges, I'll just kind of morph that into what maybe you're talking about, is that anytime you're going into a first game with a new offensive coordinator, your preparation is large. You're looking back at everything from what Coach Brown ran to what the new offensive coordinator ran at USC. I mean, you really. Guys, we went as far back as Texas Tech against Michigan State. I think it was 2009, because, one, we have a lot of time. You have all those months going into a big first game, so you can't help but start to look at the tree of coordinators. It really all goes back to Texas Tech with Mike Leach. So we started to do the deep dive, and when you see similarities, then you start to expand all the possibilities that you might see. Some of those things showed up, some of them did not. So that's kind of inevitable in a first game with some new coaching staff.
Two more for Coach. You said Tennessee is different as far as tempo, but you feel like you're preparing for a tempo team almost every week?
We do, but again, just the level that they do it at, Jerry, is really, really impressive. I mean, I'll say that again, that what they're able to do play after play after play is something that we work really, honestly, year-round at introducing this style of tempo and how we practice it. I mean, as soon as there's a couple times during spring football that we'll mix a period in where we present this type of tempo to them, a couple times during fall camp, and then obviously this week we're committed to it. So we feel like if we can handle it at the tempo that Tennessee is able to maintain, then we're going to be in good shape against other teams that are in a no-huddle tempo situation, because they do it as good as anybody in the country.
What stands out to you about Hooker, their quarterback, after seeing some tape on him?
Yeah, extremely athletic. He can really make you miss in the open field. He has hard, violent cuts when he goes to change direction. And he's an accurate passer. I feel like we've seen him for 13 years with his time at Virginia Tech, and I can remember him. This won't be his first trip to Heinz Field, so it's not like that's going to shock him. When he came in last year, he did some really special things against us. We know we absolutely have our hands full with him in the throw game and his ability to run.